We're broadcasting live. Welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. I hope you've all been safe and COVID free. And if you're not, I hope you're recovering well. We are back again with the Entrepreneurship series here at the National Public Library. I'm Miss Thomas, as always. And today we have with us Miss Shawn Nicholas. Good day, Miss Nicholas.
Hello, good day.
And how are you this nice Thursday afternoon?
I am great and I'm feeling even better now that I'm part of this discussion. I'm
Right.
good.
So today, I understand you're going to be telling us about our resumes, a little do's and don'ts, and how to make it shine so that we are the best, we put our best foot forward before that first interview. But before we get into that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what makes you so uniquely qualified to tell us about our resumes?
When people ask me for my bio, I used to say I'm Eileen's daughter and DeAndre's mom. Full stop. Everything else is after, but I'm still Eileen's daughter, even though she's no longer with me. But I'm Shawn Nicholas from the village of Willie Keys. I went through the public school system, Willie Keys Primary, Pears Secondary, and then I went on to the Antigua State College, where I did my advanced level studies. From there, I went into the world of work at ABS. I was a news reporter and would have worked my way up to the head of news and current affairs / news editor. But while I was at ABS, I also chose to do my university studies. I did a diploma in mass communication in 1992 to 93. Yeah. And then I continued on to do the BA in mass communication, both at UE, Mona. And I came back fully into the world of work. And I would have spent several years at ABS. I left ABS and I went on to medical benefits scheme, where I was the public relations manager for about 5 years or so. And then I was plucked from medical benefits and I went over to Antigua Commercial Bank, where I served as the marketing and public relations executive for just about 5.5 years or so, just about 5 years, I think. And then from there, I went full circle and I went back into public service. I offered myself for public office and became a candidate in the 2014 general elections. And I've been doing public service since then because in 2013, I was appointed a senator for the United Progressive Party. And I'm still a member of the upper house, and it's a position that I take very seriously. And so outside of that, I am now a communications consultant, and that's basically how I spend my time. And that's my life in a
Great.
nutshell.
Great. I can see now, I can see how this is a passion for you, just the way that you speak about it. Most of the time, I don't remember dates off the top of my head. So
I don't.
kudos to you for remembering remembering what year you
I
did
just know
what.
the sequence in my life, but I'll have to think 2 or 3 times as to the exact dates. Yes.
So regarding resumes, resumes are often the first point of communication between a prospective employee and an employer. And I found in speaking to students and persons who've been out of work for a while that writing the resume seems to be a very much anxiety causing situation for them. I find most persons find it difficult to sell themselves or to talk about themselves in a positive light without feeling as though they're not being entirely honest. How can we best sell ourselves? What should we have? What shouldn't we include in order to make sure that we're putting that best foot forward?
Okay, that's a very good question. But before I get into resume writing, because as you say, a lot of people just put up a mental block thinking that I just will not get it right. And am I saying the right things? Or what is it I should include? What I shouldn't include? But even before we get there, I'd just like to make 3 preliminary points because the job does not begin at this writing of the resume. To always see, and by the way, the resume is not, while we're talking career as well in terms of work, we must remember also that there are times when we are applying for scholarships and other things like that. The same principle will apply. And I just want to say, as a preliminary point or a couple of points, is that first thing, let us, as of today, be mindful of how we use social media. And I hope I get a chance to come back later to talk about that. Social media is a permanent record of your activities. And my advice is to use it for good. Uh, References, we're going to talk about a little later, but hardly ever does an employer refer to the references quoted in a resume to find out about a potential employee. Facebook and all other social media platforms where they go first. So we have to be mindful of how we sell ourselves in use of social media. And also in all of our preparations, I know some people, depending on how we feel at the time, the mood we're in, how confident we feel about ourselves, when we're coming up with things like our emails, we have to be mindful, start changing our email addresses. You will see something like sexy lips or big hips, dots, whatever. These things do not fly in the world of work. So start looking for your changing your emails if you're not there as yet. Something as simple as your name, ShawnM.Nicholas@gmail.com. Nobody has to wonder who that is. The other point I want to make before I get into the answering the questions specifically is get involved in activities outside of the norm. I wouldn't want to say extracurricular, but community involvement, because it will work well for you when you start to build your resume. And I'm going to say build because resume, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a sequence of activities over our life that we capture into that summary that we call a resume. So these are some of the preliminary points that I'd want to make as we begin. In terms, to get back to the question asked, how do we prepare ourselves? Well, first of all, we ask ourselves, what is the resume? And the resume is that document that we create to tell a potential employer and a potential university even who we are and what it does. It in a summary form of way, it basically gives our job experience. It tells us a little about ourselves, the biodata, which we're going to get into in just a while, and the reasons why you think, or these are the reasons what you're putting on the table, why that employer should consider you to be the best prospect for the job. That is where we start. There are many templates and many forms in terms of how we write the resume. And I will say that there is no right way or wrong way because people get, overwhelmed sometimes. Am I doing it the right way? And I think what we need to consider is getting the basic questions that we want to get across to the potential employer, our prospective employer, what it is we want to know about ourselves. It is said that there are basically three F's as the letter F in resume writing. And the first F is function. What is the function of the resume? And you're basically telling the person or persons to whom you're writing, you're informing them about you and what you would have accomplished. The form, it has to look a particular way. So you're not going to write it as you write an essay, a 10-page essay. It has to have a particular form and structure, which, if there are questions, people will have on that, because there is no one set way to write a resume, as I would have said. And it has to be effective. The F in one of the F's in effectiveness, it has to be effective. And it is said for a resume to be effective, it must demonstrate your knowledge of both the function, that is, you're informing those persons to whom you're writing about yourself, and the form in terms of the way in which it looks. And that is it in terms of why is it you need a resume? Because it is your gateway. It is your way of introducing yourself to your audience. And I say audience because the audience can be your employer or employees. There's some places that you go that it might be to a board of directors, depending on what you're applying for. And I think there is where we start. There is no need for a mental block. I know as a people, we tend to, I don't want to say shy, but we tend to be somewhat conservative when we talk about ourselves. What I would say to people, and I said it earlier, we do not one day get up and say, let me write a resume. You build your resume. It might not be written at the point in time, but you build it. For example, you would have gone to school. That in itself is information that you need to have recorded somewhere, that you would have been through some particular schooling. And schooling here does not necessarily mean secondary school of sorts, because there's some people who might have had to leave school, the structured school system as we know it, before graduating. But it can be technical, vocational, or the training that you have been involved in. Have them apprenticeship, have them recorded somewhere so that when you are applying for a particular job, you can go back and say, well, you know, between 2013 and 2015, I was the apprentice on the construction site at Carlisle, for argument's sake, and the contractor was Mr. Joe Bell. I was a nail technician at such and such a spa between 2005 and 2007. All these are education, not necessarily the academics as most people want to believe. So, and I think that is one of the mental blocks that a lot of people have. There is nothing wrong with someone not finishing school. It does not disqualify you from being or from having a very solid resume. Another point where I think we need to stress is the whole area of experience, because we hear people, especially young people, say that all the time, that the job asks for experience, and how do they expect a young person to have experience if they're applying for the first time. And one of the things that I push quite a lot is the whole issue of volunteerism. It's not everything we do in life we're going to get payment
Paid
for,
for.
monetary or monetized. Sometimes we do it to build our own self-esteem, build our expertise, to grow our knowledge. So if, for example, let's talk about the young man who worked for, what was the name? I said Joe Blow or whatever
Joe
his
Bell.
name. Joe
Joe
Bell.
Bell.
The young man who went along, and make it simple, it could have been a young man who went along with his dad, uncle, neighbor, somebody to help out on a job. And they like his work attitude and they say, come back tomorrow, come back next week. That in itself says something. So you're now going to record to say that between such and such a time, I would have gone and worked for, well, you're not going to call it work because it might not be for pay. And that is the point I want to make. Not every job or not every experience that you have, you should look for payment. What we should be doing is to see how we can build experience. And so when you go to apply to a well-established contractor who is asking for, maybe contractor might not be the best because I know they're graded and they might ask for particular grades of contractors. But you might want to work in a salon spa, and you could have said, well, I remember when I was in school, I used to spend my summer vacation. I used to have a summer job or a Christmas job at this particular place. And that in itself brings experience. So it's not so much that they're asking you at age 18 or at age 22 to give years of experience. I don't think that is what the idea is at all. If I can go ahead, if you don't mind, we can look at some of the things that are included in the resume. May I?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So Resume, as we say, it's you selling yourself. And by the way, some people might see it as resume, as resume, but it's pronounced resume. In my
Mm-hmm.
days of going to school, the e's were accented, so you had the r accented e, sum accented e. But the new way
Mm-hmm.
of writing is it looks like resume, but it's resume. So you're
Mm-hmm.
selling yourself. What does it entail? First, you need your name, and not the name that you are known by, but your official government name. So you're going to look for your birth certificate. And if you are Mary Carolyn Joseph and people
Mm-hmm.
know you as Suzanne, you're not going to put Suzanne, you're going to put Mary Carolyn Joseph. Your
Mm-hmm.
address, telephone number, and how other way they can meet you and reach you, which most times would be via email for official purposes like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're also going to include in that a summary paragraph as to who you are. And I say paragraph, but it's a block, it's a section. So you would
Mm-hmm.
have given your name, you would have said where you're from and your contact information. There are several schools of thought um, in terms of any one template working for the resume. It depends on where you're applying. There are some places, especially if you're applying for places outside of Antigua and Barbuda,
Mm-hmm.
North America, European area, or wherever, that they are very concerned that certain information that they do not wish to have for whatever reason. For example, we're in an age now where gender is an issue. There are people who believe it or not, and we have to respect them for that, who do not wish to be identified as either male or female. And so some business places do not ask for gender. There is also another school of thought where age should not be a
Included.
discriminatory included because it can be discriminatory. So there are some places that you might not have to include your date of birth, which will suggest your age. So these are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that, depending on where you're applying to, that you would need to know what to include and what not to include. And I hope I come back, remind me to come back, Ms. Thomas, to talk about research because that becomes important. And
Yes.
outside, yes. And then we go on. If, for example, you want to apply for, say, something in, let's say, teaching, and you might have had other employed in other places that might enhance your skills. You might want to talk about your employment history. If you did not work before, that is fine. If this is your first job, that is okay. So you will not have an employment history. Your skills, what are you good at? Um, are you proficient in Microsoft Office? Are you a skilled IT person? Are you an excellent reader? Are you someone who critically analyzes? Do you can you lay 10 blocks in an hour? I don't know what the yardstick is, but whatever you think your skills are, do not be conservative. Do not rob yourself and say, I don't want to boast. Remember, the resume is that document that you're using to sell yourself to that employer. And they should, at the end of it, say, well, yes, I would like to engage this person further in an interview to see how best my organization or my company or my business can benefit from her skills. So do not underestimate your skills. Report them all. And of course, your education is a part of it as well. And as I said before, education is not limited to academics. There's the vocational and other skills that you might have that will all form part of your education. So if it is that you did not go to secondary school, that's quite okay. If you never made it to college, that's okay. If you're not a university graduate, it's okay because some jobs do not necessarily need that level of academic experience. But whatever it is, um, make sure you mention it. In my preliminary opening number, I talked about community involvement. Employers want to know that they're not employing people who basically operate by rote. They're looking for well-rounded individuals. So if you, for example, that you are a community leader, you might be, there are many service organizations in our community that offer great service and impacting the lives of people in our community, and you're a member of any of these, make mention of it, because what it does, it presents a picture to the employer that this is a well-rounded individual who, yes, outside of work, outside of education, will be able to, and there are times that organizations can use those skills other than what you have on paper or what you would have put forward as skills. So don't be ashamed or embarrassed or conservative and saying, I should not. But that is not to say that if you have a long list of everything you've done from primary school until retirement that you're going to look for and list. You look for the salient points and the impact that they would have had on our community. And of course, any award, achievement, or anything like that you would have achieved over time, they too would be important in terms of promoting who you are, to see that, yes, you are in fact someone who a company would want to invest in, because let us not fool ourselves. When we sign on to work for an organization, to work for a company, to work for a business, yes, they might give us, we might have an exchange of labor for pay, but in that relationship to what actually happens is an investment in us as employees, because remember, you're going to be working alongside people who have experience, and any right thinking person would want to learn as much as they can, because any good teacher will tell you that when a student becomes that good and can even be better than the teacher, if we're honest enough, it would have meant that the teacher would have done his or her work. Whoever that person is within the organization would have done his or her work, and everybody benefits. You, as the person taking in the information, will benefit. The person who is teaching will benefit because they're allowing you to improve your skills so that you could offer more. And the organization or the business on a whole will benefit as well. So those are some of the key areas that we have to bear in mind when we are putting together that resume. And let us not forget as well that we have to, we should not have the employer or the prospective employer wondering, who can I talk to about this person? It is always courteous to include some references. And by references, we mean someone who can speak on your behalf if they were contacted. Someone who would have known you as Mr. Joe, the contractor from the beginning. He could have said, well, yes, John worked with me for a couple of summers, and I think he has great work ethics. He comes to work early. He doesn't leave early. He's a team player. So you would want people who can say these things on your behalf and to help to sell you to the organization. But let us also be mindful and be aware that you cannot say that I went to church with Mary, so I'm going to put, and Mary is nice, and Mary has a position in the church, and I think she likes me, and she's a family friend, so I'm going to put Mary's name on as part of my resume. No, you don't. You need to first speak to Mary, let Mary know what your intentions are, and get her permission so to do, so that when the employer, the prospective employer, calls Mary, Mary would say, oh yes, I know this person, and this is what I think of that individual. So it's always good. Do not put a name just because you know a name. Put a name for someone who you know can speak well for you. And I think, those are some of the key points that we have to bear in mind as we start to build and prepare our resume. I'll stop there for now, and if you have any questions.
Uh, no real
No real
questions at
questions
this
at this
time, but
time, but
when you're
when you're
speaking of
speaking of
research, do you
research, do you
mean
mean
for the
for
particular company or like just general research in the field, like go to the library, look at what this particular field entail, or do you mean like physically going to the place and seeing what they do?
Good question. It's all of the above. It might not necessarily mean going to the actual location to see what it's like, but I would not rule that out. I know sometimes that when we are seeking employment, sometimes if we're already employed, or even if we're not employed, we like to keep it a secret. We don't want nobody to know our business, so
Mm-hmm.
we keep it to ourselves because people are going to talk and they might blight you, or we say all sorts of things. But we learn from each other, we feed off of each other. I would not assume that I know everything. So even at my stage, I still reach out and ask for advice. Anything I do, I'm preparing a speech, I'm preparing anything, I always ask for advice because you never know. So in a case like this, you are applying to an organization. um, there is nothing more embarrassing, and I have sat in many interviews for potential employees that they come, you get their resume, they've gone past the resumes, and you invite them to an interview. And you ask them something about the company, and they have no clue. They're not even aware of what the company does. And I would want to think that if you want to be part of an organization, that you research that organization before you get in. What is it that you think you can add to what is already there to make the organization better? And remember, you're selling yourself, and always keep at the back of your mind, what can I do? What skills do I bring to make that organization a better place? So you're going to need to research, what is it that the organization, what is it they do? Who are the key people? So you cannot now go in and they ask you a question about the chairman of the board, um, the general manager, and you don't have a clue as to who. Not to know the person, but at least to know the name. What are the business? What businesses that they're into? These are some of the things that you go in knowing, not allowing them to ask. And fool not yourself. Almost every interview that you go in, the employer or those who are doing the interview will ask you, tell us what you know about the organization. Tell us what you know about the business. And a lot of people are left flat footed right there and then because they do not know. So you will have to show that you have so much interest. There's nothing that pleases me more that someone comes to you in an organization and telling you so much about your organization. You even have people who come to the interview giving you advice and suggestions as to how you can make your business better. And obviously, you will score a point because they will see
Yeah.
this is somebody we would really like to have on board, to be part of the organization. So do your research, read widely. As I say, I wouldn't rule out visiting the place. They might have different branches where they do their operations. You might only know them operating in town, or they might have a little outlet out in somewhere out in the country. Know these things and see how, you being part, if you were to become a part of that setup, how would you be able to make it the more efficient and even more effective?
Okay. So
okay.
we have
So we
two
have two
questions coming
questions
in
coming
here.
in here.
Someone is
Someone is
asking, how
asking,
long
how
is too
long is too
long
long
for your
for your
resume?
resume?
Good
Should you
question.
keep it to 2 pages? Is that too much? And also, someone is asking, what about if you've had a gap, you didn't complete school, and you've been doing informal work all of this time? How do you frame all of that positively in your resume?
Yes, two good questions. How long is too long? I would like to tell people not more than 2 pages, and even 2 pages can be a little long. So a page, page and a half, I think that is adequate. Nicely spaced. So you're not going to write a long, long, long essay. So it's nicely spaced and formatted. A page, page and a half. That's okay. In terms of if you were to have gap years, as I said, don't start from that premise that you have gap years because you're telling us that something went wrong. Nothing didn't go wrong. We all have choices in life. And if at a particular point in time, someone made the choice that, you know what, I want to leave school, the formal school structure, to go and gain a skill. Nothing at all is wrong with that. You can say, it depends on how you couch it too, that I would have attended X school. Sometimes you don't give too much, you leave it for the interview. If they don't ask you, well, it's okay. But if it is that you left school to go and do, say, become a crop farmer, because I mean, I tell people all the time, there is no job that is demeaning. Every job that puts money in your pocket lawfully is a good job. So if it is that, for argument's sake, you left school at third form, or you never made it to secondary school, and you went into farming, and you have been able to produce 20 pounds, well, maybe not 20, 200 pounds of lettuce. No, well, not lettuce. Lettuce is like 200 pounds of pumpkin per month. Find a way of seeing what you can pull out. What are the successes of what you have done for the period for which you do it? So you might have been a very successful crop farmer, providing supplies to local supermarkets. And that too can be part that I have been in farming for the last 5 years, and I've been providing local supermarkets. And you might want to list some of them with whatever crops it is that you have. And that is a success story right there. Not necessarily that you have 5 and 6 or 7 O levels and 2 A levels. Yeah.
I'm seeing specifically, like, for persons who would have gone off to be mothers and are now attempting to re-enter the workforce, how do you frame that time away positively?
Okay. You might want to say that because, and sometimes it becomes necessary, maybe not in the resume, but in the interview, that you are a young mother. When I say young, that you have a young child, because that will affect, well, maybe not affect, but that can impact how they position you in an organization. Because, for example, it might be a job that requires shifts, and because you are the mother of a young child, or a toddler, or someone under the age of 5, they might say, okay, we might not want to put you on a shift or anything like that. So that it becomes important that you say it. How do you frame it in the resume? That you, whatever school you attended, if it is that you were unemployed for the period, you say that you were unemployed, or just there would not be anything. And if asked, then you could say, well, you were mothering your child or children for this particular, so you were a stay-at-home mom, and that's it. You see, from the way the question is framed, it suggests to me that people are looking at a way to say, oh, something is not quite right with me. Remember, we all make choices in life, and it's how we apply what we would have learned from the choices, because I believe some of those people who would have gone on to be moms, not finishing school, are excellent mothers. And, you might be a housewife who you're involved in cottage industry. You might be into soap making. You might be into seamstress, tailoring, or whatever it is. These are things that you can mention. I think our society tends to define success as the O levels and the A levels and the university degrees. But I am one to think that those who are good with the hands are just as important. And, to me, there's no barrier depending on the job you're applying for.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at it, I guess they are concerned that having spent that much time outside of the world of work, that it may be looked down upon, or they might think that they may not get the job because the employer may not want to have to deal with the fact that this person has a child and there's some things they can't do. And so I'm guessing they're afraid to put that information there because it may create a barrier to employment for them.
No one should be discriminated for anything at all when it comes to jobs. I can understand that the person might say that, I do not have the experience or I do not have the academic qualification. Outside of that, having a child should not be a barrier for someone seeking employment. And I would want to know, not wish to think that there are employers who would say, well, you have a child, so I cannot employ you.
Okay. True. And also mothering brings with it all kinds of inherent positivities. I mean, you have to learn how to
Exactly.
juggle all kinds of things.
And that's a very good point, because which is the point I'm making. If you were to talk to someone who is not a mother and you compare it with someone who is a mother, mothering has skills. You have, for first and foremost, time management. How do you manage your time? How do you manage your household? How do you manage your budget? How do you live on a limited budget? And these are qualities that you can transfer into the world of work to say, you're not going to allow your business place to splurge, your organization to splurge. You're going to be the one to say, and there is that mothering instinct that some of us do have. And I have been, I've had persons, women in my life, in my work life, who I look back to and say, I thank them, because it's outside of the skills that you bring to the job. They are the ones who kept you grounded, to make sure that you keep in a particular path. And mothering does that to us women. So it
Right,
is a
because
skill.
the softer skills I find also help to hold us together.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm not bashing the men. I'm not bashing the men at all. But when it comes to conflict resolution, women have a way of seeing all sides, and there is that side of us, that empathy, that and other things that we bring to the table, that we have a way of analyzing issues, problem solving skills that sometimes our men do not have. And workplaces rely on these skills. They're not taught in exercise books, they're not learned at universities, but you bring them to the table. So, whoever that person is, not a barrier at all in my book.
We have a question about formatting. Are there specific things you should stay away from, like curly fonts and bright colors?
Yeah. That's a very good point. There is a saying, less is more. And by that, you don't need, I know some people, which is why sometimes I tell you, do not keep it a secret if you're doing a resume. Reach out to people who might be able to help you, and don't be shy. There are people who, everything, all the apps are on our devices. So we do some very colorful templates and all the colors in the rainbow and all the fonts in that we can think of. No, keep it simple. One font can take you through. You can take, I've seen, for example, you might want to highlight your segments, and you might want to change your color font, and the other is in black. But don't go for no bright red, no bright orange, no. Keep it simple. If it can be all black and white, that is fine. And as I say that too, I want to believe that I should also say that presentation is everything. That is where it begins. That is where that first impression is made. That is going to decide whether the prospective employer is going to say, let me take a look at this, or let me put it in file 13. So you don't want it too busy. You don't want it too, don't prove to them that you know all the fonts on your keyboard, that you know all the colors. Keep it simple as possible. Because remember, it's a business document. It's not an ad that you're creating. It's not a flyer.
Right. And don't overdo with the italicizing, bolding, and underlining.
No. In fact, if you can avoid them, I can understand bold to highlight your subject headings. But other than that, no bold and no italics. Italics, if there might be times that you might want to highlight something within what you say, within a sentence, or a name of something that you might want to highlight, and you italicize. But keep the font just one font, bold
Mm.
and unbold, and that's it. Yeah. It's not a flyer, it's not an ad. It's you basically trying to get into an organization. And
Mm.
always remember, less is more.
And on that note, I want to say thank you very much for talking with us today. I'm sure that our watchers would have taken away a plethora of information. I don't see that we have any more questions. And so I just want to thank you for coming out today and giving us all of this information. And we look forward to having you back again, perhaps
Sure.
at a later time, to do a little bit more
Sure.
discussing about your various career choices that you would have chosen over the years.
Sure. And I would just want to encourage my people. Life is a stage. You might be not where you want to be at this point, but don't think that your stock opportunities are out there. It's for you to start looking. And as I said, don't wait until the job comes. Start building. And I deliberately use the word building your resume, and everything you do, you put in so that when the time comes, it's easier to sift out than to sift in. So make sure you start building your resume and all those social media posting, please, because employers are going to go there to find out who Mary Jane really is. They're not going to go to your pastor or your teacher who knows you as the little girl down the road or the young man who used to come to church.
Mhm.
Please
They're going
make
to see
sure.
all your wild parties
Exactly.
and TikTok challenges.
I mean, young people, I mean, I didn't have those when I was younger, but I mean, let us use social media wisely. I am not trying to dampen anybody's spirit, but always ask yourself, if an employer were to look at your page, your following, if your children were to look at your page and your following, would they be pleased with what they see? And that's basically, the message that I'd want to leave. And finally, reach out for help.
Mm.
Don't make it be the best kept secret, thinking that nobody ought to know. If you want to have that form, that effectiveness that I spoke about, reach out for help and sell yourself. Let that organization know that you are the best person for the job, and it would be very hard for them to refuse you. And I just want to say thank you very much. I didn't realize the time went by so quickly. It's a pleasure. And anytime, and it will be remiss of me if I don't go to just a plea to our people. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. My dear people, let us stay safe, stay at home if you don't have to, go to places only if you have to. The socializing, tell your friends that we have to stay apart now so that we can be together later. Let us keep Antigua and Barbuda safe. All of us, all of us are affected by this pandemic, and it takes personal responsibility for us to get past it. So that's my little soapbox moment there.
Thank you very much for joining us. And we are very pleased to have you with us. And
Okay.
so next week, we're going to be having with us Miss Damara Phillips, who is a disc jockey, and she will be talking to us about the world of entertainment. Bye bye for now, everybody. It was a pleasure seeing you all again.
Bye.
Bye.